This morning, my topic is accepting others as they are. And you often hear me say, and I don't need to remind you of this, that where our practice really gets challenged and where we get challenged is in our relationships, our close relationships, our relationships with people we just encounter. Where we really get challenged as human beings is with our relationships. And one of the biggest challenges in that regard is accepting others as they are, not as we want them to be. Um, it comes up again and again. Much suffering, our own and that of those close to us and those we just encounter briefly, originates in this tendency to want people to respond and behave in ways that we think they should. And it's natural for us to wish others were different. I mean, that they would be more to our liking, that they would be less prone to habits and behaviors that we find annoying or challenging to us. And often with those that are closest to us, it's the little things that sort of begin to accumulate and get under our skin. Leaving dishes in the sink or socks on the floor or cabinet doors open or whatever. And and you will not be surprised to hear me say that our ego plays a huge role in these situations, since we want what we want when we want it. I want now for you to behave in a certain way. And those of us that have had the joy and sorrow of parenting know well how difficult it is to let our kids be their own people, to just kind of let them be who they are, not who we think they should be. It's a huge challenge for everyone who's ever been a parent. And though I'm not going to get into it today, I'll just say parenthetically that this whole accepting business also includes ourselves being as we want to be, not as we are. Once we begin to take a really uncensored look at ourselves, I mean, we get into these same patterns with not accepting ourselves as we are, but you know, chastising ourselves when we don't meet some standards. Now, I don't mean to suggest this morning that we can't ask others to be different or make those requests. What I'm talking about is that we can't be so attached to their doing so and so clinging to their doing so that both we and they suffer if they don't or won't comply with our wishes. And sometimes we don't even articulate those wishes. We just sort of carry around an idea of how others should be, never say it, and then get upset when they aren't the way we want them to be. So once we begin to look closely with mindfulness, with discernment, how often we get upset when others don't behave as we think they should, we begin to see it everywhere. I mean, it's all over the place in our lives. The clerk who doesn't move the line along quickly enough, the driver who cuts us off, our children who don't do their chores, our friends who don't show up on time, our mates who don't, do what we wish they want what we want them to do. And the suffering really ramps up and gets more intense when we become self-righteous, angry, blaming, badgering, or engage in any type of struggle over others not doing our bidding, not doing what we think they should. And of course, we think whatever we think they should is the right way. I mean, that's our ego again. They don't do X, Y, and Z. And of course, that's the right way. What's wrong with them? Can't they see that they need to be doing this differently? Um, and we begin to see how this pattern, especially when it involves the self righteousness, the anger, the blaming, interferes with our connection to others. It becomes a wall between us and that person. How our non acceptance of others leads to our own isolation, our own loneliness, a real source of suffering. It cuts us off from other people. It gets in the way of our really connecting in a meaningful way. That is why we focus on it with this path, because the practices of acceptance, the practices of letting go of these expectations are so important to facing these challenges, because it's the only way we can begin to knock down that wall. So it means we accept others both for who they are and who they are not. So we not only have trouble with who they are, we have a trouble we have trouble with who they're not, who we want them to be. Now, let me be clear here, because this sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. Accepting others as they are doesn't mean we agree with them, doesn't mean we approve of their behavior. It doesn't mean we're waiving our own rights. It doesn't mean that we need to downplay the impact they have on us. It just means we have to acknowledge that we can't control how other people behave. We don't have to like how they are. We don't have to like how they behave, but nor do we need to then get into the stories and start judging people and condemning them. We recognize that we all, including ourselves, can be annoying, can be difficult, can be challenging. Now, that said, of course, we take actions to set boundaries, to protect ourselves from abuse, to exploitation, toxic behavior from others. We set clear limits as required. But as you hear me often say, the Buddha never said we should be doormats and just roll over when people treat us badly when it comes to our relationship with others. But our challenge is to accept the reality of who and what others are. We make our peace with it. We move on. So the question then becomes, how do we achieve this? Well, as always is the case, it starts with ourselves, the place where our judging mind often shows up the harshest. We don't wait until we're in challenging interpersonal situations to try to work on cultivating acceptance. In the heat of the moment, we can't do it if we haven't practiced it, if we haven't made it part of our practice, as though we're rehearsing for those difficult moments. We're going to get knocked over. We're going to get blindsided. So we seek out less challenging situations. We and set an intention. There's our intention to practice accepting others and the aspects of others that we don't like, that we think should be different. The other day I was in line in a pharmacy to pick up a prescription, and there was about 4 people in front of me, and I had somewhere I needed to be, and the clerk was at the counter was chit-chatting with a person at the front of the line who apparently was a friend of hers. And I could just feel the tension rising in my body. I begin to notice that I'm sitting there sort of tapping my foot and getting impatient. I could feel the tension. And I begin to sort of pay attention to my thoughts, which went something like, doesn't she know this line is long and we're all waiting and I'm in a hurry? And I could feel my frustration, my suffering increase. And I reminded myself at that moment, it was one of those rare moments of clarity that I had no control over her behavior. Sure, I could get snarky and start, making loud comments about her behavior, causing her to suffer as well and making everybody else in line uncomfortable. But it would have only made the situation worse. It would have made me look like an entitled jerk. Why am I so special that I should get special treatment here? And I could feel my breathing get shallow. I tensed up. I was tight. I was contracted. So I shifted my attention to the others in line. I slowed my breathing down. I began to make small talk with the guy in front of me, and I made a conscious choice in my head to let go of the expectation that the line should move faster. Now, this is a silly little example, but it's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I recognize that my ego's sense of entitlement about the line moving quicker for me was the culprit in my suffering at the moment. And so when I got to the counter and sort of worked with this while I'm waiting in line, I remarked to the clerk that she seemed to be having a busy day. I hoped she was not too stressed. It was a pleasant encounter. We were both spared the unnecessary suffering. Now, that's a silly example, but it shows you how this stuff shows up even in situations like that. Now, imagine if it's your loved one, your partner, your child, your friend, or whatever. And think about how many times of day opportunities like this present themselves where we can come to that fork in the road. We can either go with snarky entitlement or we can go with acceptance and letting go of how others should be. And recognizing we have no control over how they are. We can ask them to be different. I could have said, "Oh, could you move things along?" But even that would have been, a little too entitled. Um, with acceptance in these situations, the whole scene softens. And that's exactly what happened to me in the pharmacy. We experience a lightening, we experience a spaciousness. I get my breathing relaxed, my body language relaxed, my muscle tension relaxed. I had a nice little silly conversation with the guy in front. This is the freedom that the Buddha promised us. By letting go of the grasping and clinging, the things over which we have no control, especially in the interpersonal realm, there's freedom. There's reduced suffering. We open to the ease, the relaxation, and importantly, that we talked about a few weeks ago, the humility that comes with acceptance. I'm not so special. I'm just another guy in the line. I have to swallow that. I have to accept that. What about me? Well, you're just another guy in the line. So contrast that with how entangled we get by not accepting people as they are, by not accepting these interpersonal situations they are. We get all tangled up, and it helps me to remember how good I feel when someone accepts me as I am, faults and all. When someone accepts me with all my quirks and all my idiosyncrasies and neuroses or whatever, it feels good rather than, telling me I need to change, telling me I need to do it better all the time. How their generosity of accepting me as I am is such a gift. We welcome it. And that reminds me to extend that generosity to others, accepting them as they are. Because as with all generosity, acceptance is a gift that comes back to us, in doubles, and this is yet another gift of the Dharma. So accepting others as they are, not as they wish them to be, not as we wish them to be. So let me stop there and let's talk